Have you ever sat at your desk, looked at the clock, and realized you still have hours left? You don't hate every part of your job. Maybe the people are okay. Maybe the salary is decent. Maybe the work itself isn't even terrible. And yet, something inside you keeps saying, I can't do this forever. You imagine leaving. You imagine waking up somewhere else, doing something different, having more freedom, maybe even becoming the person you always thought you could be. But then reality comes back. The bills, the responsibilities, the uncertainty, the fear of making the wrong decision. And suddenly, you are sitting at the same desk again, doing the same thing, living the same week, waiting for Friday, then waiting for the weekend to end. And eventually, you start wondering something frightening. Is this really my life? If you've ever felt trapped in your job, you may think the problem is your job, but the real reason might be much deeper. You don't feel trapped by work. You feel trapped by what work represents. Your salary represents security. Your position represents stability. Your routine represents certainty. And your job may even represent your identity. You've spent years becoming this person. The person who works here. The person who knows how everything works. The person people depend on. The person with experience. The person with a predictable paycheck. So leaving doesn't simply mean leaving a workplace. It means stepping into uncertainty. And humans don't naturally enjoy uncertainty. Your brain prefers something familiar, even when that familiar thing makes you unhappy. Because at least you know what tomorrow looks like. You know when the alarm goes off. You know where you're going. You know what people expect from you. You know how much money arrives at the end of the month. You know the problems you'll have to deal with. And sometimes, familiar unhappiness feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. The golden handcuffs. Maybe you've heard the expression, golden handcuffs. It describes something that looks like freedom from the outside, but feels like a prison from the inside. Maybe your salary is good. Maybe you've worked hard to reach your position. Maybe you have benefits. Maybe you've been there for 10 years, and the better your situation becomes financially, the harder it can feel to walk away, because now you have more to lose. You tell yourself, maybe I'll leave next year. Then next year arrives, and you say, maybe when I have more savings. Then you save some money, and suddenly you think, maybe after the next promotion. And the years keep passing. Nothing changes, except you become more comfortable with being uncomfortable. The sunk cost. There's another reason leaving becomes difficult. You remember everything you've already invested. The years, the education, the training, the sacrifices, the promotions you worked for, the experience you've gained. And your mind tells you, I've come too far to start over. But there's something important to understand. The time you've already spent is gone, whether you stay or leave. You cannot recover it by remaining somewhere that no longer fits you. Imagine spending 10 years walking in the wrong direction, and then realizing it. Would walking another 10 years make the first 10 years more valuable? No. It would only make the journey longer. Sometimes, the hardest decision isn't admitting that something is bad. It's admitting that something that once made sense doesn't make sense anymore. When your job becomes your identity, maybe this is the part that hurts the most. At some point, you stop saying, this is what I do, and started believing, this is who I am. Your job became part of your identity, your title, your responsibilities, your achievements, the respect you receive, the feeling that you're useful. So when you imagine leaving, you aren't only imagining a new career, you're imagining losing a version of yourself. And that's terrifying, because who are you without the position, without the title, without the approval, without the routine, without the people who know you as that person? This is why some people stay in jobs they no longer love, not because they are weak, because leaving forces them to answer a much deeper question. Who am I if I stop being this person? You start living for Friday. When you're trapped long enough, your life can slowly become divided into two parts: work and recovery from work. Monday becomes something you survive. Tuesday becomes something you endure. Wednesday becomes the middle. Thursday feels close to freedom. And Friday becomes the reward. Then the weekend arrives. For a moment, you feel like yourself again. You sleep longer. You see friends. You go outside. You do things you actually enjoy. And then Sunday evening arrives. The feeling returns. That heaviness, that quiet resistance, the realization that tomorrow you have to go back. And eventually, you stop asking, do I enjoy my life? You start asking, how can I make it through this week? That's a very different way of living. When motivation disappears, you may also notice that you're no longer trying to improve. You do what is required, nothing more. You stop volunteering. You stop suggesting ideas. You stop caring about small things. Not because you're lazy, but because some part of you has already emotionally checked out. When people feel little control over their work and face high demands, research has linked that combination with greater stress and exhaustion. A sense of autonomy, competence, and connection at work is also associated with healthier motivation and better work outcomes. And this creates a dangerous cycle. The less connected you feel, the less effort you give. The less effort you give, the less satisfied you feel. And the less satisfied you feel, the more trapped you become. But maybe you don't need to quit tomorrow. This is important. Feeling trapped doesn't automatically mean you need to resign tomorrow. Sometimes the answer isn't quit. Sometimes the answer is understand what is actually making me unhappy. Maybe it's your manager. Maybe it's the schedule. Maybe it's the lack of control. Maybe you don't hate your profession. Maybe you hate the environment you're working in. Maybe you need more responsibility or less responsibility. Maybe you need different people around you. Maybe you need more time outside of work. Or maybe you genuinely need a completely different direction. But you can't solve a problem you haven't identified. So instead of asking, why do I hate my job? Ask a better question. What exactly makes me feel trapped? Because those are not the same thing. The question you need to ask: imagine you knew you couldn't fail. You wouldn't lose your home. You wouldn't disappoint anyone. You wouldn't lose your financial security. Nobody would judge you, and you had enough time to start again. What would you do? Don't answer too quickly. Sit with the question, because your first answer might not be practical, and that's okay. The point isn't to immediately quit your job. The point is to discover what part of you've been ignoring. Maybe you want creativity. Maybe you want freedom. Maybe you want purpose. Maybe you want more time with the people you love. Maybe you simply want to wake up without feeling like your life belongs to someone else. You don't need to escape overnight. Sometimes we imagine change as one giant decision: quit, Move, start over, become someone completely different. But real change rarely happens that way. Sometimes it begins with something much smaller: learning a new skill, saving money, updating your resume, exploring another field, having one honest conversation, setting one boundary, turning your phone off after work, taking back 1 hour of your day. Small actions remind your brain of something important. You still have choices, and choice is powerful, because one of the strongest feelings of being trapped is the belief that you have no options. Even when your options are limited, they may not be zero. Your job is not your life. Your job can be important. It can provide security, purpose, structure, and even pride. But it should not have to become the entire definition of who you are. You are more than your job title, more than your productivity, more than your salary, more than your performance review, more than the number of hours you worked this week. Because if your entire identity depends on your career, then every bad day at work becomes a bad day in your entire life, and every failure becomes a failure of your identity. That's too much weight for one part of your life to carry. The real reason you feel trapped, maybe the real reason you feel trapped in your job, isn't because you have no way out. Maybe it's because you've convinced yourself that leaving would mean losing everything: your security, your identity, your progress, your certainty, your place in the world. But change doesn't always mean losing yourself. Sometimes it means finally meeting the person you've been suppressing for years, the person who wants more, the person who is tired, the person who has dreams you stopped listening to, the person who wonders what life could look like if fear wasn't making every decision. And maybe you don't need to leave today. Maybe you aren't ready. That's okay. You don't have to destroy your current life to begin building a different one. You just need to stop pretending that nothing needs to change. Start listening to yourself. Pay attention to the feeling you get on Sunday night. Pay attention to the thoughts you have on the way to work. Pay attention to what makes you feel alive and what makes you feel numb. Pay attention to the things you keep saying. Maybe someday, because sometimes, maybe someday, is really fear saying, please don't make me change. You don't have to obey it. You can listen to it, understand it, and still move forward. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's realizing that fear doesn't get to make every decision for you. Maybe you've spent years thinking, I just need to become better at handling my job. Maybe you thought you needed to be stronger, more disciplined, more grateful, less sensitive. But maybe you don't need to become better at tolerating a life that doesn't fit you. Maybe you need to understand why it doesn't fit, and then slowly, honestly, decide what you want to do about it. You don't have to quit tomorrow. You don't have to have the perfect plan. You don't have to know exactly where you're going. You just need to remember that your current situation is not necessarily your final destination. A job is something you do. It is not everything you are. And if you've been feeling trapped for a long time, maybe the first step isn't walking away. Maybe the first step is believing that you are allowed to want something different. Because your life is bigger than your paycheck, bigger than your position, bigger than the office you sit in every day. And one day, you may look back at this period of your life, not as the years you were trapped, but as the moment you finally realized you had a choice. If this video spoke to you, consider subscribing. This channel is about the thoughts, fears, and struggles that so many people carry silently. And if work has made you feel stuck, exhausted, or like you've lost yourself, remember this: you are not your job, you are not your productivity, and you are definitely not alone.